Welcome to the ANWA Beyond Sunday podcast, where we are dedicated to helping believers integrate their faith into everyday life. I am one of your hosts, Candace, and I am here with three other hosts, Jasmine, Dave, and Dre. And we're still in our learning series on the gospel. And jumping right in, today we're talking about holiness and sanctification.
Light topic.
Very light. Like we can really just kind of cover this in about 5 minutes. We'll be out of your hair. You can go on with your day. Just real quick. Real quick.
Is that my
Well,
cue?
That is
I,
your
I
cue,
think,
Dre.
I think
Okay, all right.
Dre might have an opinion. Dre might have
Dre
an
has a
opinion that would get us
Dre
started.
has an opinion. Yeah.
I don't know
Absolutely.
I shouldn't say it's an opinion. He has a stance that he would like
Oh,
to
I
share.
do have a
That's
stance.
good.
He's
That is
passionate
good,
about it.
Dave.
Yeah.
And very passionate about it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I'll preface this like I come from an African American approach. I was born and raised like extreme, what they call like holiness church, holiness movement. And if you grew up in church in the 80s and the 90s and you were like around Pentecostals or charismatics during this time, it was like I was raised in the no movies, no going to the bar. Women didn't wear makeup. Women couldn't wear pants. If they did wear jeans, it was a blue jean skirt. And that was for like youth day, like if we had a conference or something like that, but it wasn't, you don't do that on a regular Sunday. Um, it was extreme. And what they would say is holiness or hell, right? Like, as I guess I'll get into this, as if like our actions as if our actions made us holy, as if like if you wore makeup, then that made you holy, or if you didn't sin today, then you were holy. As I've grown in this, I realized that as I've studied the sacrificial system, because I have more of a Hebrew approach to holiness. I don't necessarily fully ascribe to the fullness of the Greek definition of it because it involves too much about morality. And when we look at holiness in the Old Covenant, holiness was not fully about morality because the Hebrews couldn't stop sinning, but yet they were called a holy nation. The Hebrews, I mean, were never loyal to God, but yet they were still called holy. Um, Abraham is working for God in his presence, but he's a liar. Noah, I'm sure he's not perfect. He's holy. He's receiving righteousness by faith. He can be in the presence of God, right? So this is me just going from Genesis to Revelation. Jesus is walking with the 12. They all got their own situations, but then Peter is like, "Wait a minute, we're a holy nation. We're a royal priesthood, right?" So if and actually I'll say with this, the blood, right, is the sanctifier. When you go throughout Leviticus, wherever the blood is going is what's being sanctified, right? So when the forks are being sanctified, when the tent is being sanctified, there are the Levites who were ordained in Leviticus. That was a 7-day process, and blood was also applied to them as well. So we know that the blood is something that is used to set men apart, right? So this definition for sanctification is to be made holy, right? Now I don't fully ascribe to the Greek definition of that. I kind of ascribe to the Hebrew version of that, to be made holy. And when you look at the book of Numbers, God is telling only the Levites to carry certain instruments for the tabernacle. And he's like, hey, the forks, this is holy. The bread, this is holy. The thing that hold the poles that hold the tent is holy. The tent is holy, right? So, and for me, I'm like, if a fork can be holy, why are we out here like saying that we ain't holy because we sin today? If David couldn't hold this Ark of the Covenant when he won the war, and then he walking around. This is the scripture where David danced out of his clothes, right? And so he's walking with the ark, and then somebody dies because they're touching the ark, right? But the Levites gotta give offerings and sacrifices every day, but only the Levites can touch the offering, can touch the ark of the covenant, because only the Levites are set apart to hold the holy offering. So wait, what exactly is sanctification? Because David was morally pure enough to be king, but wasn't holy enough to carry the Ark of the Covenant. Only the Levites could. Only the Levites were set apart. So this is why I don't fully ascribe to morality being the fullness of what holiness is. And I think it's dangerous for when we see morality and when we make morality the basis of holiness, it robs us of what Jesus did on the cross. Because if the blood is the sanctifier, and if the blood is what actually makes men holy, then what I do is not the definition of whether or not I'm holy. How I act and what I do after being made holy communicates my status. So
Yeah.
when I walk up on a Christian, I should know that he's holy because of how he acts. But that doesn't mean that I'm not holy because I sinned today. Right. So what we do, and this is, it also plays a part in how in our prayer and worship life. It plays a part in why we don't come to church. Up, I sin, so now I'm about to go in prayer and not pray. But if you remember that you're actually holy, right? If you remember that you're actually holy and set apart, this is how you have access to pray. But if I'm not holy when I sin, how do I have a prayer life?
Well,
So go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think before we continue on, the emphasis on the holiness movement and coming out of that is really important, because that doctrine of once you have been saved, you should not sin, and therefore you cannot go do all of these things so that you're avoiding sin, is a big underlier of what you're getting at here, which is something we need to healthily deconstruct. That idea that you have to somehow be perfect because you have now been sanctified and made holy is not, it's just not the reality. Even to your point about the Levitical priests, they were made holy, but they still had a process to follow when they were going through a purification ritual to not die in the presence of the ark. So, they were set aside, but they still had to be used in a holy way, which I know we're going to get to, but I just think it's really important to think about that, as somebody that didn't come out of the holiness movement, but I see that, and the consequence of that idea that, well, you're not sanctified if you're not living a perfect life, in that regard. So I just thought I'd throw that out. I know I interrupted Candace, so.
Oh no, you're good. I agree with you, Dre, in terms of like I don't think that the fullness of what holiness is should be centered around morality. But I do think that morality is a part, it is a component of holiness, because if we're using the definition of morality as like what's right and wrong, then God be, God being holy, Yahweh being holy, and we are in covenant with him. He establishes what is right and he establishes what is wrong, which is why, the whole conversation around, well, oh, good people can go to hell or good people can, well, yeah, like what's your definition of good? Like holiness has to be the standard. It has to be the definition. It has to be the plumb line by which we determine what is good and what is bad, right? And so for me, I agree. I too grew up in church and was around those ideas where, like my mom wasn't nearly as strict, but I heard the rhetoric, right? But our definitions of what is good and what is evil, what is good and what's bad has to come from something external of ourselves, which for me means that this component of morality does exist within holiness. It's not the totality, but if he has declared that I am holy, then as a response to that, I
Right.
should do what is good in his eyes.
Yeah.
But that is because whatever it is that I am doing, he has defined that as good, and
Yeah.
not my own desires or what the culture has said is good, or even what his personal standard is for me. If he has instructed Candace not to drink alcohol, then that is bad for Candace, thus it is sin. Thus that is not a solid response to his holiness, and it is not in line with him declaring me as holy, because this is the standard and the definition by which he has created for me.
Mm.
So yeah, I'll just say that, but I do agree with you.
So when you don't, if God tells Candace don't drink and
Hmm.
Candace drink, the second Candace drink, is she no longer holy?
No, that is not correct. I don't agree with that.
Okay. We just
Yes, that's
making
good.
sure like we on the same page. Okay.
Yes,
And I,
no, I is still holy. But that consistent disobedience that turns into patterns dulls my ability to hear, dulls my ability to perceive, to know, to understand. And it's not that my identity as holy changes, but this inner working, I I slow it down, I pause it, so to speak. Um, but I am still the righteousness of God. I'm just in a pattern that isn't serving me well, and ultimately is marring how I see God and how I see myself.
I would also, so I also grew up in the holiness movement. So I no secular music, didn't wear pants till I got to college, and my poor mother, you know,
Jesus.
yeah,
Thank you, God. Thank you, God.
she's
Thank
still
you, God.
praying for me. But the the concept of holiness that was introduced to me was these are parameters or restrictions, and so you avoided certain things. But I think to Candace's point, there's also this concept of how am I consecrating, or how am I offering up my life so that, to Dre's point, or maybe it was Dave's point, of like being used. And so it's holiness isn't just I'm abstaining from a thing and now I'm holy, because your holiness was already sealed. But the concept of living it out, what living out what was already done, is also this concept of offering up your life so that God can use you in a way that is distinct.
Yes. I do think that the point of holiness is distinction, right? I believe that holiness is the essential qualities that a being has that is superior to humans, right? So it's superior morality and superior power, superior qualities, superior essentials, right? And so when I get stamped with holiness in every area of my life, right, not just morality, it communicates my holiness, right? Because remember, holiness was not about the Ten Commandments. The priest,
Right.
the high priest, could not get blood on his clothes, but he was required to come into the temple with no shoes on. So when we even say like, oh, holiness is not about what you wear, no, like the priest had,
No
I'm
context.
about to say, like, now maybe when they weren't in operation, but when they actually clocked in for work, the Bible communicates
Yeah.
that this they had an attire, right? Oh, holiness is not about what I eat. Oh no, because we see that God did care about dietary. He had dietary laws. Now we do know in the new covenant, Peter, Peter, or was it Paul that was saying like, hey, don't come into this whole concept of like what you eat and what you drink, or did you know about the moons and the feasts. So we know that these are not matters of holiness, but these can be responses to being stamped or being made holy, right? Like, and we know it's true because the pork in the Old Testament is labeled unclean, right? They are not even supposed to have it in the land. So even when we're like talking about Jesus like pushing the demons into the pigs communicates how much wildness was going on at that time. Because why is there even pork in the land for Jesus to send the demons to the pig? Like, so we see that that pork had always been a symbol of being unclean. But then Peter has this vision, and it has unclean things in it. But then in the vision, God is declaring what was unclean clean, but the pork did nothing to be clean.
Well, it wasn't set aside or chosen.
But the pork symbol resembled the nations that weren't clean, right? So it's like, oh no, y'all are trash, or like what do we call them, the like, because like Israel just knew, like anybody that weren't Israel, they were trash, they were unclean, to the point where they couldn't eat and sup with them. So it's like, no, the nations are unclean, but then in the blink of a moment, God just made people holy. But their response to Him is to morally be pure, right? So
Right.
when and I think Candace, what I'm kind of agreeing what you rocking with the morality, but from this from this concept of grace, because I do believe when you are not living a holy lifestyle, you frustrate the grace of God,
Because we don't
right?
like to
Mhm.
talk about
We don't.
that his grace can be frustrated,
You frustrate, and
canceled,
remember,
nullified.
yes, these benefits, like when we like, oh, He daily loads me with benefits, right? So your ability to hear God, which is by grace, your ability to maintain to be righteous, which is by grace, be justified, which is by grace, your ability to stand in His presence. Y'all people that have dreams and y'all get commuted, y'all get transported to the throne of heaven, right? That is by grace. You have no business being in front of God at the throne. Like, you ain't that holy, fam. Like, Isaiah he needed coals put on his mouth because even he recognized, I'm not supposed to be here. So let's be clear, all of that is by grace. And when we live, not because I don't want to be cure, I want to be like sinning and living a sinful lifestyle is not the same,
Yes.
right?
Agreed.
You sin, like there were laws set up for just like, oh, okay, you sin, right? God never condoned the perpetual lifestyle of sin, which is the opposite of holiness. So you sinning yesterday, or you having a moment of weakness, you not missing the mark, that does not declare you unholy, right? But it does. But your perpetual sin affects your usage for God, because you.
Well,
Go ahead.
it's a matter of holiness should yield obedience. So when we want to talk about morality or any of the things that apply to us as active beings, then yeah, there needs to be an obedience to God's law that is the fruit of holiness.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, we can have land that is holy, we can have time that is holy, we can have tent stakes, pots, pans, whatever. Those things are holy and they are sprinkled with blood. But if they're used for something that's not holy, they become unholy and they need to re-become holy. That's different than what we're talking about, which is the sanctification of a believer being set apart and becoming holy or righteous in God's eyes. That is complete. However, it can continue to be fed as we step in and out of obedience. So the whole concept of like people that will say we're sanctified and we're being sanctified, which is probably more of like the church background that I came from, which is sanctification is once and done and it continues. Well, that gets a little confusing, right? Well, the reality is if we're in and out of obedience, we still need the continued process of sanctification. It doesn't mean that my salvation, my salvific, my eschatological salvation is being flip flopping from holy to unholy. But my actions, my obedience, my working out of my salvation does need to continue to fall under this idea of sanctification, of continuing to be made holy over time, because I'm going to mess it up. Just like they're
Yeah,
going to drop one of those utensils and they're going to have to make it clean again.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think when Yahweh gives instruction to be holy because I'm holy, maybe he is getting at identity and not actions, right? Like
Yes,
it's
100%.
not the be holy, therefore do these things. Oh no, I'm actually trying to generate an understanding of you existing
Yes.
as the holiness of God. Like I'm not telling you to do right things. I am telling you to
Yeah.
exist. I am
Yes.
telling you that I've already made you righteous. I've identified you as holy. Stand in that. Be
Yes.
that. And
And
and the behavior that'll come. But if I
exactly.
can get you to know who you are, then your response is the easy part. But I gotta work this identity in you first. So be holy
Right.
because I'm holy and you're in covenant with me and I've made you holy. Like,
But
do the
Yep.
thing.
holiness should strike dedication, because just like
Exactly.
that fork is going to always be used by God. Like, we're not being holy so we can go to heaven.
Right. Right.
No.
Say it one more time for those that are sitting in the back row because the sound system is a little messy.
Our
They
seat
didn't
in
hear you.
heaven, our seat in heaven is already secure. Right? This ain't even about heaven right now. Right? It has nothing to do with heaven. I'm not being holy to go to heaven.
Right.
I'm going to heaven by faith, right? Now here's the
Yep.
thing. I still have a part to play
Yep.
after being made holy.
Yes. Yes.
That tent, that showbread, that fork, the sun, everything. When we go to the book of Hebrews and it say everything was made by him and for him, this is me. When I become holy, it is me communicated that I am being made and stamped by him, but I'm also being made for him. And in order for me to be made for him and to exist for him, I live out this holiness, this sanctification.
Yes.
Because if I'm just out here moral sitting in my bed all day, but I have not exercised the weight of the kingdom in my community, am I holy?
Right.
If I'm like, God, I'm going. I mean, I can't wait to go get my crowns in heaven. I've just been a good man, a good girl. But but I ain't trying to do that church stuff. I don't want to be no deacon. I'm not trying to serve. I'm in a point in my life where like I'm getting my mental health together. And oh no, don't call me to start no church. Like, oh, you're not living out the fullness of holiness, because everybody that was made holy knew that they had work to do after they was made holy.
Exactly. That's the I'm sorry, Jazz, do you want to say something? You look
I
like you
was going
want
to
to
say something.
you jump in.
Yeah, but it's the concept of the acceptance of our identity of being holy drives our decision making, which ultimately yields a life of obedience to God's purpose in the earth. Like it's not
Mm,
just, oh, I'm just made holy. Like Dre was saying, like I'm just sitting in my bed and I'm like I'm seen as good, but I'm understanding that because of this identity, I now take on a responsibility of the will of God concerning everything that I am called to or every place that I am put in, because he
yep.
wants to work through me and distinctly use me so that he can be seen by others through me.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why your your actions that you've deemed good. Oh, well, I gave to the poor. Well, who told you that that was good? Because if you aren't existing within this covenant, then you're a law to yourself. And at best, you've allowed culture to inform what you think is good. So the culture says giving to the poor, giving the homeless, man
Right.
or woman a meal. It made me feel good that I did my good deed for the day. And culture tells me that, I'm taking my cues from culture. Culture tells me that that's a good thing. So yeah, I'm a good person, but goodness for the believer, goodness for sons, goodness for kings and priests that exist in this covenant with Yahweh, we take our cues from his holiness
Goodness
and
doesn't
His
his
mean holiness.
his
His.
holiness, because
his
because remember,
holiness.
it has to be superior
It has
morality
to be
Yes.
superior.
and superior power. So even
Absolutely.
you people that's like that gift stuff, that's for the pastors. That's for I don't. Why am I going to a ministry training? I'm not called to do that. I'm just supposed to sit here and be a greeter.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're supposed to be at every training that involves power,
Yeah.
because if we're supposed to be holy as he's holy and he moves in power, wait, Jesus said that those that believe on me will cast out devils. Speak. He didn't say the pastor gonna cast out devil.
Yeah.
He didn't say
Yeah.
that those who were ordained are going to cast out devils. This
It's
is
for
the
every,
believer.
Yeah.
yes. Yeah.
Also,
And this is
also he
also
says,
for the people. Oh, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, to add to Dre's point, he also says, those that believe on me, greater works will these men do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, no, this is actually, if you believe, you should actually expect this in your walk and expect to see this as you live a life consecrated. Like, God is going to use me to do greater works. So
Yeah.
we
Which
appreciate,
it,
yeah, go ahead.
which is why this, I mean, insert many commercial rant, which is why the present day, these, and I'm trying to use my words, this movement of prophetic communities and teaching, these are these are benefits for every believer. Let's not make this like hearing God, having access to him, being able to understand what he is saying, and then living that out, or maybe even communicating that to someone else, is some special, a lot like allotment for a special people.
Mm-hmm.
This is the toolkit of a believer.
Yes, it
Believer.
is.
That's good.
Now,
So could it be?
now,
Go ahead, Dave.
in this is my executive pastor hat, as you say that, which
Be
is
an executive pastor.
uh, at not everyone that in the context of a corporate gathering, not everyone
Oh, for
has
sure.
license to do that. So
Absolutely.
yes, this is the gift of all believers, and we should work to exercise it. But this is why,
Yes.
as a body, we have trainings, why we have places, why we have people that we say, hey, you are authorized to do this. And it's not to say that every believer doesn't get this gift, because they do, but we do, out of care and love for everyone, we do put structure around that. So I only say that
Absolutely.
to say, don't take it offensively if you were told, hey, you haven't gone to prayer 101, or hey, you haven't gone through the prophetic cohort and we're not asking you to do this. The reality is that you might be very, very prophetically gifted. We all are prophetically gifted. It is the reality of the gospel of grace and God's mercy and the gifts that he gives. However, we have to be good stewards of the people that are
Mhm.
here. So,
And
I don't
structure
know.
is holy.
I felt compelled to jump in on
That's good
that.
No,
stuff.
And
that's
I think
good.
it is important that we, there was a reason that Paul said to his congregations, even, you don't get to just do this. And
Absolutely.
it wasn't, we'll save that one for another topic. It wasn't just directed
Yeah.
at the women. it
Yeah.
was, it was,
Yeah.
It
it was,
wasn't.
it was a
It
Yep.
commentary
wasn't.
about how they were administering their service. And he was saying, you need more order here.
For sure.
Structure
But order
provides
and structure is
accountability.
holy. Yes, it
It
Yeah.
is.
does.
It is. It's set aside. It is set aside. It is consecrated. It is sanctified.
But I think this concept of holiness being directly connected to identity, the reason why we don't see the miracles and like quality leadership and us feeling like we can't trust the church is because we have left the responsibility of holiness to those who feel called, as if
Yeah,
every believer isn't called.
exactly. Yeah.
Like, if you are called, then you are called to, have also been made holy, right? Like I said, you can't lift your hands in worship and say, I encounter God, without being made holy. There is no visitation coming to you.
None.
You without you being holy. You can't say, up, something told me to leave my job. God told me to leave my job and go to this job. There ain't no, you don't get that visitation without being holy, right? And so that all of these encounters are byproducts of it. But can it be because we don't want the superiority, the superior, the to live out God's holiness is why we are missing the fullness of the new covenant, the full benefit package of the new covenant. Because if I don't believe that I'm holy, if I don't believe that I'm set apart for special usage, then I'm going to just think that oh, why am I going to church today? Or like, well, why would I join this ministry? All I gotta do is be good and feed the poor, and Jesus said like all you got to do is just love, and we're great.
I want to add something, but I want to ask a question first. So Dre, you just said, and I started to write it down, and I didn't get it because I
I
didn't.
got it.
But
Do you want me to read it?
well,
Because that's
maybe
what I
if
was
you have what
typing.
I had, if you had
I
what
don't
I
know.
had, but
Was it?
you you said you don't get that visitation if you're not holy, something to that extent, right? What about somebody that isn't a believer that experiences God's grace in a supernatural and profound way? How does that work in this in with what you just said? And that's not a I'm not like really trying to challenge. I'm asking a very genuine question.
Because God is so amazing, and just like He can make a fork holy, when Abraham wasn't a man of God's covenant, but received the visitation. There
Mm,
are several people throughout Scripture where God came on them. These are not men engrafted into an official covenant, but this because we're talking about this law of grace, right?
mm,
This law of grace,
yeah,
and
yeah,
God is extending
yeah, yeah, yeah.
these qualities of grace. Like, hey, I'm about to come to you, but because we just think that God is just so like, oh, he came to me. But remember, before he come to you and sit with you, he got
Yeah.
to make you holy first, because
Even
it has
yeah,
to
yeah,
be. This
yeah.
is the eternal principle, right? So for that moment, he set you apart for that moment,
He set you apart, right? So
and you
okay,
don't even know it.
Jacob wrestling in the wilderness. Yes, that was a
Yes.
moment of yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because his presence, being in proximity to him requires it.
And he has to
Right,
give you
right,
favor.
right, right.
He has to give you favor that you don't
Unmerited
deserve
favor. Yep.
for you
Yeah.
to even experience that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that what you had written down, Jazz?
I have a whole nother question that he wrote. Or he said,
Well, do you want to go there?
well,
I
he,
don't. Yeah, go ahead,
I mean, it
Jazz.
was the question where he was like, is it because we're not living out God's holiness, which is the reason why we're not seeing the fullness of his covenant? And I was like, oh, let me write this down.
Mm.
This is,
Well,
this,
that's what I want to push into a little bit,
okay.
which is we talked right before we started recording. We were talking about Philippians 2:12, and I'm going to read it just briefly. Therefore, my dear friends, as you have always obeyed, not only in my presence, this is Paul writing to the church in Philippi, so not only in my presence, Paul's presence, but now, much more in my absence, continue to work out your salvation with fear and trembling, for it is God who works in you to will and to act according to his good purposes. So this passage that Paul is talking about gets used a lot in this conversation around sanctification and holiness. Um, I think because it has the word salvation in it, we instantly apply um, doctrines of salvation to it, soteriology, and then eschatology, our final judgment. Are we going to heaven or to hell? But what Paul's saying here is not that you have to work for your salvation. You don't have to work for this unmerited grace that you've received. What he's saying is you have to live it out is as a community. You have to live this thing out. And it goes back to that idea of once you are made holy, your charge is to be obedient. You have to step into the obedience. And so there's a responsibility that this isn't, and I'll harp on this a lot. And I said it in a previous episode, which is our salvation is not just about us. It's not just about me. It's about this community of the saints being redeemed. So it is holiness, especially in Israel, and the idea of being unclean and the damage that that can do to the community is huge, because it is not just about me and whether or not I'm holy and set aside. It is about whether or not we are holy and set aside, and whether or not we are working out our salvation with fear and trembling, meaning we don't just take it for granted. We don't just assume, oh, I'm holy, I can do whatever I want. Oh, I don't have to live up to these moral standards, which should be the fruit of my holiness, because I have to work this out. I have to work it out in this group. I have to work it out as a body of believers. I have to do this in a communal way that honors God and honors the principles that he's given us.
There's something about experiencing the kingdom of God that is innately communal that I think gets lost with Western civilization, especially American culture, because it's so individualistic. But Dre said something last episode that, like, he said it and we kept going, but it was the grace of God transforms communities. And the concept of not just that when I don't decide to live in this identity, the damage it does, but when I decide to live in this identity, how it builds up the community that is around me, how it blesses, may preach to, may draw in the community around me. And so when I decide to occupy an identity and let that be the driving force of how I make decisions or how I show up in the world, that means my community gets to experience transformation because they begin to see, to opt into, to take on that same identity.
Right.
I can't remember who, y'all probably know the person that said the quote, but it was like, always preach the gospel, like
Sometimes without words.
sometimes without words, like the concept of
Was that John Wesley?
I think that's what it is. Candace?
I think
Okay.
it's
Don't know. I'll find it while you.
Okay, awesome. But the concept of my decision to live in an identity and circumstantially or coming out of that, this holiness that is actually exemplified in my life actually preaches to the point that it draws people in to say, I actually want to serve this God that you serve. I actually want to take on the identity that you have. I actually want to be engrafted in the way that you have been engrafted. Actually brings a community, an entire people, into a place of revelation and submission.
The holiness of God is directly if you want the level of glory, and we talk about, like, when we think about glory, it's just like, oh, we had a good service, right? But the presence of God, the manifested presence of God that stays within a community produces glory, right? The byproduct of his presence ultimately produces this umbrella of glory that is supposed to cover the earth like the waters cover the sea. Holiness is what attracts it. It's not just like, oh, God is with us, like, because it's like, oh, God is everywhere. But when God decides to dwell with the people, and the people responds in holiness, what they receive is the amalgamation of glory, right? This blessed in the city, blessed in the field, blessed in my comings and going, you're going to have your babies, this is going to happen. That's glory. It's not a good church service. It's everything that we need is happening right before our eyes. The things that we couldn't ask for, the things that we didn't know to ask for, all of these things are being supplied. Holiness, and I'm not talking about the gifts, because we think that, like, a accurate prophetic word or a moment of healing is glory. I'm talking about the lifestyle of healing, the lifestyle of fruitfulness, right? Even in droughts, right? Because if it's glory, when the world is in chaos, I'm still supposed to be living a realm of because remember, holiness is distinction. So remember, the world is supposed to be like, how are you receiving this? For the people who lived holy, like Daniel, like, people were like, what? How it didn't, the favor and the glory didn't make sense. they weren't able to say like, oh, well, it makes sense that you got that job because you got a degree, or like, oh, you hang with the big guys. Like, no, when holiness is at work for real, the benefits is glory, and glory don't make sense. It's like, why? What did you do to get to deserve that?
Mm.
What did you do to for you to be able to like to set out for something and receive more than what you set out for, right? And so glory is sustained by holiness. And I know it's real old school, but it's the and you cannot, because we think power is glory.
No, no, it's not.
It's not.
Power is baby work. The believer can do that full of sin. The Corinthian church is out here. I mean, they got a whole master class on the gifts because they move in them. But
Actually,
someone in the community cannot stop sleeping with his mother-in-law. He has decided not. No, this is not a moment of weakness. He decided that he's not going to stop, which is why Paul
Patterns.
is. Which is why Paul is like, I've already judged him. Y'all ain't kicked him out the community yet, and y'all love the like, oh, give him grace, give him mercy. No, we're talking about a situation where this man refuses to stop. Right? He's aware of
Because
the
because the community will be impacted
right.
by his consistent, going back to Dave's and Jasmine's point in terms of like this individualistic concept. It's understood that if you all keep him
The
around,
whole community becomes unclean.
correct, it is going to impact thinking, ideology, how people like they're going to assume that this is okay.
and it impacts how God
Excommunicate him.
and it impacts how God responds to us. It impacts him him when we say like God is with us. That's what it impacts. It's
Right.
being able to stay in his presence, being able to not just have power that comes through grace anyway, right? Like, so us having good moments in service does not communicate whether or not we are living a lifestyle of holiness and pleasing to God, right? It's wait, is if 60% of our church can't pay their bills, how we live in the glory.
Because that doesn't make sense.
No.
And I'm not talking about everybody in our church having a good job, because in the first century church, there are poor people, but they're living in this realm where everything is being met. Every need is being met, and they're giving cheerfully, right? So we're not saying, oh, I'm going up the corporate ladder, because going up the corporate ladder is not glory. It's
Well,
somewhere in every social status is in this room, and somehow we are all being taken care of in a way that don't make sense. That's glory. That's and that is produced by holiness. That it's produced. Like, I'm not talking about good moments in service, because that God does that. I'm talking about seasons of glory production.
uh,
If you want the full benefits package, it comes with holiness. I know we are in this because remember, we're not talking about heaven. We're not talking about a matter of salvation. We're talking about when you sit here and say, I want to see God's kingdom on earth. You can't be saying that if you don't want to be holy. It's impossible, because Israel was supposed to be the priest to the nations. They are supposed to engraft and mediate the nations in, and they don't do that without being holy.
right.
Which is
There's
why we
nothing
have to allow.
There's
Oh,
also
go ahead.
nothing to engraft them into if they're not holy.
That part.
Nothing.
Nothing.
And we have to, like present day 21st century, we have to allow the Spirit of God to reshape our minds around desires. Because, and what I mean by desires, by like, we should want this.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
response
Because, yes, I
to
mean,
grace.
we should want it, and we should find delight and satisfaction in it. Because hell would have us think that this means that we live a life of complete denial And by denial, I mean we won't be satisfied. That denial means, woe is me, I just gotta live this life where I'm just holy and loving God, but I'm not satisfied. I'm not content.
But you
Mm-mm.
can't be holy without the grace of God, but without your knowledge of it, which is why in those prophecies in Exodus, God is always like, I am the God that brought you out of Egypt. He's like,
Right.
before he gets to talking, he is listing his resume because he's like, let me
All the
remind you
time.
Yeah.
that like everything that you have right now, you didn't pay a dime for it. You didn't work for it. There was no election in the nations
Hinged
to
on
get you
me.
this.
Yep.
I literally did this before y'all did anything for me. Y'all groaned and I came. And actually I had this set up before y'all were slaves. Like this
Yep.
this was
Yeah.
already predetermined.
You cried
It
out and I answered.
literally. And so trying to even conceptual, like if you want to go into holiness by just morality alone, oh, I just gotta be good. Without the concept of his grace, this is going to be hard for you.
It's not,
Because the goodness of God is supposed to empower you to live this life. And we're not just talking about morality, we're talking about the full scope of obedience. If he wants you to be the mayor of Chicago and this don't make sense to you, be that. If Sarah birthing out Isaac is oozing God's holiness in the earth and showing how distinct he is. Although it made no sense to her.
right.
It's whatever the man is requiring you to do, your obedience is your responsibility to remain holy or to be holy.
And even using Sarah and Isaac and this promise fulfilled and seemingly God asking for it back, and Abraham gathering
Yep.
his animal, his promise, and all of what he needed to climb the mountain to go to essentially give back to God. What, bro, I waited 100 years and I got it. And let's go,
Asked it for it
because
back.
God is going to provide for himself.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a man that understood God's grace. Because even if let's be clear, if Isaac went in that situation and died, Abraham has seen so much up to this point. All provision is being fronted by God at this point.
Right.
Literally.
Going from place to place, country to country, that provision is coming from God. Abraham is sold.
Yeah.
Not only is he sold, but scholars say that Isaac was probably a preteen. This is not a baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
This
No,
is a
he knew.
walking,
He
talking.
understood what was
He
going on.
he
Yeah.
understood what was happening,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think about
because he
that
was
all the
actually
time.
helping to carry what was
Yeah.
needed to build the altar.
Yeah.
Isaac is he's not an infant.
You know,
So
I
Abraham
think,
is actually raising his son. Let's talk about teaching your
yeah.
children, raising
Yeah.
your children in this. Anyway,
It,
sorry, Dave. Go.
well, I've always found it striking, like Isaac sort of like is attached to his mother. It's like you see that, and I was like, well, Dad did try to like put me on this altar, so like I'm probably gonna be more into Mom after that. um, but no, I agree with you, Candace. Like I think Isaac understood what was happening, and I think that is part of, as he continues to accept the promise, like he witnessed it. So
Because I think even
yeah.
Abraham's obedience in walking Isaac up there, Isaac is aware of what's happening, is a teaching moment for Isaac. Like
Oh yeah.
to Dre's point of like whatever God asks you to do and your obedience to what he asks you to do, like, and the impact of that was not just Abraham and what Abraham is learning from God and seeing God's provision and this ram in the bush, but it's also this shaping moment for Isaac, that he watches his father walk up this mountain and he's like, hey, where the sacrifice at? Like, because I know it ain't me. And then he's like, God will provide. God will provide. And he's like, I know we ain't carry an animal up here, so what's going on? Like, I'm sure he's putting the pieces together and understanding, okay, my father is showing some level of faith because of his obedience to this command that actually doesn't make sense. You've promised me that I'd be a father of many nations, and I got my one that I'm walking up here that you've asked me to sacrifice. So even that's formative for Isaac in terms of his understanding of faith and obedience, and subsequently what it means to walk in a yieldedness to the command of God and the covenant of God for a people.
Mm.
Oh yeah, because a part of what sustained glory is it's generational, and
Yes.
that we are teaching those that come after us, like we are raising them in this. Like I remember hearing my mother, like, I guess, talk to her friends, but I'm reminded, like, present day, like if we're contextualizing it, your kids should see you in prayer at home.
Yes.
This
They
is
should
home.
they should not, like, the only time that your hands are lifted and they hear you like verbally giving God thanks and all the things is in church, and Monday through Saturday it's just silence, or it's just the
Wow.
TV, or it's just you're not raising your children or those that you have responsibility for. You're not, like, creating and cultivating an environment at home where this is normal. You out of line, out of order.
And it needs to be more than saying grace.
And it needs to be
As
more than saying
Greg
grace.
pointed out last week, not just grace before dinner.
Yes. And it's
It is
not
not,
just attending like a church service
but
and
attending church service
experiencing,
alone.
like, the glory in a service and thinking that that's no.
But attending a church service alone does not make you distinct.
Right.
It
Because
does
that's the
not.
key. We don't want to be distinct. We don't want to be different.
It holiness requires distinction. You are not
Yeah.
supposed to look like everybody. You're not like, but even this, what makes holiness so amazing, we talking about Abraham, is that I think the reason why Abraham was able to do this is because when we talked about exceeding great reward in the last episode. But that exceeding great reward concept was introduced to Abraham, and the Levites lived it out.
Mm-hmm.
So Abraham didn't see the promise as a reward.
Same way Moses didn't.
It was always him. And what removes our holiness and distinction is when we believe that our reward is the provision or the dream that we had, or
Yeah.
the this is what I believe this is what I expect from God, or what I expect from my friends. The greed of that, the craving of those things pulls us out of distinction, because then we look like mere men chasing desire,
Yeah.
when our desire is supposed to always be him.
And look at how we've let the church do that too. I mean, the church, capital C, big church. You know, there's so many people that say, well, I don't see any difference between the church and the people around them. It's because the church, hear me, the church is not living out its holiness. We are not being set aside. To Candace's point about not wanting to be changed and conformed, like we want the benefit, but we don't want the reality that we are set aside at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the doom and gloom, fire and brimstone gospel that is so damaging, which is like, this is all about punching a ticket for the next life. It's like, well, what good is it if it's all for the next life? Like, it should change the way we live today. And if it
God.
doesn't, then you have to say, like, are we becoming holy? Have you become holy? If it's not changing something,
But
yeah.
you know that the era of I was raised in that era of the Left Behind series.
Yeah.
And we're not going to turn it into that, but
Robert Langston, Robert.
I don't even
Yeah.
know. But those series of movies were traumatic on a lot of levels. But I think, and not to turn this conversation into that, but I think one of the things that it birthed and cultivated in a generation of believers is this escapist mentality. In that I can't, I'm not concerned about this life. I'm not concerned about like what's happening now, because I've got a mansion in heaven, glory awaits me. And yeah, like my mansion and my seat in heaven, that was
Mm.
sealed when I accepted Jesus. Like, but he is very much equally concerned with like my here and now, and me being an epistle that can be read of men, so that draws more, like draws more men. Like, heaven is the easy part, but if all we're concerned about is heaven, then we live our lives raggedy. Yeah, we don't even see the beauty of allowing heaven to invade earth, and
Mm.
being a part of like that, like being conduits of like, oh, I'm a part of this process of bringing heaven to earth.
Yeah, I
And
was
if I
going to
don't
say
see heaven, I'm not living out holiness.
no on earth.
Mm.
Yeah, it's the concept escapism mentality is antithetical to when Jesus says the kingdom of God is at hand. Like it's here. And
Literally.
so if the reality is that Jesus is saying this, that means we're now engrafted into a process of seeing that manifest in the earth. So if all I'm worrying about is my seat in heaven, I've totally usurped a place of authority, a place of participation, a place of seeing something manifest that Jesus says, it's here. Like, here it is. Come on. Like, follow me. So we do ourselves a disservice when we think more about heaven and escaping the realities of life instead of understanding the seat and the authority that we have in the heavenly realm because of what Jesus has done, and how we can move in that authority to bring the reality of heaven into the earth.
I love that. God,
Holiness.
the Bible calls the angels holy, and heaven doesn't have a morality issue, right? These angels are holy because they are literally daily, daily bringing God's reality into wherever reality they go. They may be on Mars tomorrow, or in their everything that they're doing is showcasing God's distinction. And when we go from town to town, place to place, job to job, we raising kids. If that distinction isn't being made known, then men is being made known and not God. And then therefore we're not living out this idea, this concept of being a son or a daughter of God. Like, if this is my father, and it is my responsibility to reveal the Father, if Jesus is the ultimate Son, and his responsibility is to reveal the Father. If I'm not revealing the Father in my actions, and the Father is distinct, so I shouldn't see my Father, my actual. When you pull up to me as a Christian, you shouldn't see Andrew Barry
Mm.
by the time you're done with me. It should be, oh no, I know you got an earthly father, but I need to know who else you know.
Right.
Who sent you? Because Andrew Barry, what you building ain't for Andrew Barry, or the way you show up
It's
does
more.
not. It don't bring light to Andrew Barry. Why are you like this, right? And this is why that first generation turned the world upside down. They grabbed a hold of the grace of God, and they grabbed a hold of that holiness, and because the weight of holiness was on the Hebrews so strong that when the 12 realized they didn't have to give sacrifices and offered every day, they like, oh, what town we gotta go to? You wait, we ain't gotta fast when everybody else fasts, because we even seen the saints were mad that they didn't wash their hands at a certain time. Jesus is they like why are your disciples not doing this? He like the bridegroom is with them. They don't need to do that. So they don't got to do the washings. They're not fasting with the community. They when Jesus is resurrected, they don't have to give sacrifice and offering. They like, oh, where you want us to go? Like, shall we obey God or shall we obey man? Like, I know they told us not to preach Jesus, and at this point they want to kill us. But I mean, I've experienced your holiness in such a way where I have to do what you want me to do. Like, what you want me to go to Samaria where people don't like my ethnicity anyway? Oh, Philip went to Samaria by himself. He didn't have the apostles with him. That holiness drove him to a place where he would have been deemed unholy as a Jew, and showed up and flipped the city and made people that were unholy holy by faith.
My God. Just be holy.
Just be holy.
Be ye holy.
Be ye holy.